All right, true believers, welcome to this episode of the Freedom to Draw Unsolved Mysteries. This is a final appeal section of Freedom to Draw Unsolved Mysteries. The case of James Barber. Set to die in a couple of days by the state of Alabama. And we're going to tell you about his case. At the same time, we're drawing him. The mystery here is, will this man be put to death, or will his execution be halted? In this episode of the Freedom to Draw Unsolved Mysteries, with me, your host, John Krupa. Strap yourselves in, guys. We're about to delve into the mind of a homicidal maniac. Okay, so we're going to draw James Barber here and tell you about his case and him against the state of Alabama. And it's the Uruguay Constitution Day. So we have some Uruguay music in the background. That's what you're listening to. So this article is from 2004. James Barber sentenced to death in the murder of 75-year-old Dottie Epps. A Madison County man has been sentenced to death for beating a 75-year-old woman to death with a claw hammer, I may add. The judge who sentenced James Barber called it a cruel, heinous, and wicked crime that was committed. They said different things at different times. They tried to put me at the scene, and I was never there, said Barber after the sentencing, maintaining his innocence. A jury convicted Barber of beating 75-year-old Dottie Epps to death with a hammer in May 2001 and recommended in December he get the death penalty. Barber worked for Epps as a handyman. Defense attorneys are fighting for a sentence of life in prison for Barber. When you look at the facts of this case, he beat an elderly lady to death with a claw hammer. If this isn't a death penalty case, there's no such thing, said Assistant District Attorney Robert Broussard. An appeal to death penalty sentence is automatic. The Epps family says after waiting for more than 2 years, they are very relieved and glad the ordeal is over. That looks like a normal guy, right? Don't let looks fool you. We got Uruguay music on. This is Uruguay Constitution. day, today. And now we're gonna let you listen to an article from just a week ago. After 3 botched lethal injections, Alabama plans to execute James Barber. And here's what he looks like. Normal looking guy. I was shocked when I saw this. Exercising her newly granted authority for the first time, Governor Kay Ivey on May 30th directed the Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner to execute James Barber by lethal injection at any time between midnight on July 20th and 6 a.m. on July 21st. Alabama's execution protocol was revised in March after the Alabama Supreme Court announced an unprecedented rule change granting the governor unrestricted discretion to set a time frame for carrying out executions. The rule change followed a brief suspension of executions in the state after the torturous multi-hour execution of Joe James in July 2022 and the botched attempts to execute Alan Miller and Kenneth Smith in September and November attracted national and international attention. Guaranteed the people that are reporting on these guys don't know the crimes that they committed to get in there. They wouldn't be so quick to dispute it if they actually knew the crimes that these guys committed. Despite the governor's promise of a top-to-bottom review of Alabama's execution protocol, the only change in the protocol is the extended time frame for carrying out the lethal injection. James Barber asked a federal court to block Alabama from executing him by lethal injection, citing the state's failure to make any meaningful changes to address the problems involving IV access that caused the state to botch the last 3 executions. Lawyers for Mr. Barber wrote in court pleadings that Alabama is the only state in the U.S. to botch 3 executions in a row. On Friday, the federal district court denied Mr. Barber's motion for a preliminary injunction, finding that the state's pattern of botched execution has been disrupted by replacing members of the IV team with new staff and by giving prison staff 6 additional hours to carry out that execution. More about Mr. Barber's case. James Barber was convicted of capital murder in 2001, for the killing of Dorothy Epps in Houston County. Mr. Barber's memory of what happened that night is hazy. He was suffering from substance addiction, and as the Atlantic reported, he had smoked crack cocaine, drunk at least a case of beer, and taken prescription painkillers before arriving at Mrs. Epps' home. And in his words, he was really effed up. People get effed up, but they don't decide to beat an elderly woman with a claw hammer. Uruguay's Constitution is today. Uruguay Constitution Day. That's why we're listening to this in the background. He said in a 2012 court hearing, that he remembered being inside the house and picking up a hammer. After that, the Atlantic put it, Barber narrated his immediate horror at what he had done, how he had recoiled from his own image in a mirror moments after the crime. He said he didn't know why he struck Epps, it just happened. Prosecutors were unable to persuade all 12 jurors that death was the appropriate punishment for Mr. Barber. In nearly every other state that has the death penalty, the jury's non-unanimous verdict would have required that Mr. Barber be sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Mrs. Epps' granddaughter, Sarah Gregory, opposes the execution. She reached out to Mr. Barber to extend her forgiveness, she told the Atlantic, and was deeply moved by his response. Sarah, sorry, could never come close to what is in my heart and soul, he wrote. Self-loathing, shame, shock, and utter disbelief at what took place at my hand almost overcame me. If not for God's grace, I would be gone. You have freed me, Miss Gregory replied in a letter shared with the Atlantic. Receiving your letter was a final piece of freedom. The weight was lifted when I forgave you in my heart, but your response back brought me indescribable freedom and release. I have no anger. Zero. I feel as if 1,000 pounds were lifted from my soul. I cannot thank you enough. I am sorry that it took me so long. Today, Mrs. Gregory said she regularly talks on the phone with Mr. Barber about her life, her family, and the Lord. She feels despair about Mr. Barber's upcoming execution. I don't want it to happen, she told the Atlantic. I don't want to see it done. That is interesting dynamic of this case. The victim's granddaughter is actually on this guy's side. You don't hear that much happen. I think that's the first I've ever heard of that. But regardless, it's looking like it's gonna happen. Usually a couple days before the execution, if they're gonna stop it, they usually stop it about 2 days. And it is the 18th. It's looking like it's probably gonna happen, but we still don't know. The victim's granddaughter may get her wish. He may just get life. It is unclear why Mr. Barber picked up a hammer and beat the elderly lady with it. I think only he knows the explanation. And this is from 5 days ago. Advocates hold vigil for Alabama death row inmate set to be executed. Montgomery, Alabama. A vigil was held Wednesday afternoon for James Barber. Barber will be the first person executed since the state failed multiple executions and conducted an internal review of its protocol. Barber was sentenced to death in 2004 for the murder of Dorothy Epps in Madison County. Cyrus Johnston doesn't have the power to stop execution, so he mourns. "I think it's wrong to take a human life, period," said Johnston. Since '84, he's attended a vigil for every person executed by the state of Alabama. I wonder if Mr. Johnston does research on all the cases that he goes to mourn for. Just wondering. Back in the 80s, 70s, 60s, there was an ambience of hope, said Johnston. Johnston attended this vigil for James Barber, held at Resurrection Catholic Church in Montgomery. Barber is the first person set to be executed since the state botched multiple executions last year. If I was this guy, I would be a little bit worried that they're gonna screw it up again. The other guys that got executed were there for hours and hours in agonizing pain, but hey, the victim probably was hours and hours in agonizing pain also. So it's horrible to say, but if he suffers, it's not like it's not well deserved. The Alabama Department of Corrections reviewed its protocol. After the review, it added more medical professionals, ordered new equipment, and conducted execution rehearsals. The state also created new rules that allow Governor Kay Ivey to set a 30-hour time frame for Barber's execution. The most decent and humane thing to do would be wait until either the protocols can be established or some medical procedure can be established, said the pastor of the Resurrection Catholic Church, Father Manuel Williams. But does Father Williams know what this man is accused of? That's what I want to know. I really don't know if these guys get on camera or get a newspaper person in their face even know what the person is accused of doing. We're listening to Uruguay music because it's Constitution Day for Uruguay. Barber's execution timeframe will begin July 20th and will end July 21st. Alright guys, well that does it for this episode. The freedom to draw unsolved mysteries. This is the case of James Barber. And will he be executed in the next couple of days? Time will tell, and we will update you. So peace out, true believers. We're going to listen to some Uruguay music. And that will take us out. Peace out, true believers.